Hello, the cabin. I hear there's a man here that wants to hear some stories. Fellow up in the public house at Eaton done told me that yesterday. I've come down to tell you some. Alrighty, I'll tie up over here. I'll join you there. Well, now then that my girls are all tied up, we can go ahead and do this a little bit more. Now, are you that Mr. Brink that they told me about's collecting stories?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I am.
Well, I don't want to get you in a swelled head, but I came all the way from Kansas to do this.
Well, that's a trip.
Yes, it is. But I'll tell you, I was going to come over here anyway. I'm coming to visit my family. Now, I'm told you're a trustworthy man, and I could tell you the truth, and you won't go ahead and tell the authorities. My people are Shawnee, and there's some of us that are still living back here in the Ohio lands, the Spele-Withipi, and we're illegal. But it was time for me to bring my grandson his own horse, and so that's what I'm doing. Now, I left back there in Kansas 3 weeks ago. Went over into St. Louis, and I picked up what's now called the National Road. Used to be called the Cumberland Road or the Cumberland Pike. Now they've got a cutoff that'll take you over to Dayton. And I decided that I was going to take that cutoff. And so when I went in to that public house in Eaton, this is right there at the cutoff, that's when I heard about you. And I thought, well, I haven't been down there since, well, the War 1812. At that time I was 17 years old and a warrior. And it was up to me and some of my compadres to come down here and take a look at things to see what was happening with this Oxford and this Miami University. Now our good friends, the Miamia, used to be here. They're all part of our kin. We all speak sort of the same language. And during that time, they got moved out. And that's how the university was able to come here in 1809 and set up. But that War of 1812 kind of put things on the, well, on the slow side. And so I was here and I wondered what this place would look like today. So I decided to come down this way anyway. And what I've seen, it looks pretty good. I'd much admit that it would look a lot better with our homes on it, but it seems to be built well, and I hope that some of these folks are getting educated. That's part of what I wanted to share about, was some of that education. For you see, if people don't understand another person's way of life, they don't think it's important. So I wanted to try to help that a little bit. And to do that, I decided I'd tell you some stories. Now, first of all, you got to understand this. My people came here a long time ago. In your year counting, it was 1101 AD. Now, we keep track of it by knots on a rope, so we know exactly when we came here. And when we came here, we found some folks already living here that were building mounds and worshiping death. Well, we took in all of their survivors and mixed up together. Now, there's some people called archaeologists that I heard about, and they're starting to call that something like Fort Ancient. But it was just us all mixing together. And we were here right up until, well, the war that brought. 1794 we lost. Up until that time we'd been doing right well. We had sent the governor, that St. Clair fella, with his tail between his legs back to Fort Washington. But that was 1791, and in 1794, well, that feller came up against us that he was just wild as can be. And when he came against us, well, we up and lost. And so we decided that what we're going to have to do is make peace. And in 1795, they made peace. That was the same year I was born.
Yeah, is that right?
That was the same year. Only I was born over on the Muskingum River. And my folks, because my ma was pregnant, they didn't go up to the big council. And because of that, then, they stayed behind. And they never did move up there into the Northwest.
Oh, after the Treaty of Greenville?
That's right. After the Treaty of Greenville, they stayed put.
They stayed where they're at, okay.
And the folks around there liked them. And they were able to buy land because their neighbors said that they were citizens that had come there with them. Well, they're still there. And that's why I said you got to keep them a secret, because they'd get taken out of here to Kansas. And after the war, you know what they're going to do? They have told us already that since the war ended back in April 1865, they're going to move us all to Oklahoma. Now, we've been in Kansas ever since 1832.
Mm-hmm.
That's because that Andrew Jackson fella, you know, the great father. I'd like to tell him what kind of a father I think he is. But the great father, he said that we all had to leave. The Indian Removal Act of 1830. And in 1832, they removed us all. And we went out through Cape Girardeau, because some of our people were already there, and on into Kansas. It wasn't long till the Methodists come along and established the Shawnee Mission for us. And then we started in farming and setting up some ranches. And then they took our children and they put them into their boarding school. You know what the first thing was they did to them?
No, what was that?
They cut off their hair.
Cut off their hair?
They cut off their hair. Now,
Why would they cut off their hair?
for most people, cutting your hair means that somebody that you really love just died. That's how you mourned. But they cut off their hair so they'd look white.
Huh.
They wanted them to dress like them, just like I'm dressed right now.
Yeah.
Because during the war, I was fighting for the Union. And I still got part of my uniform here. And I had to cut my hair to come over here, because you can't travel as an Indian. It's not safe.
Is that right?
So I cut my hair. In fact, I brought it so I could show it to my ma, so she'd know that I hadn't forgot any things that she taught us. And there it is.
Huh. So they made you cut that off because you didn't look the white, you didn't fit the white profile.
That's right. And you weren't allowed to speak your own language. And so some of our children didn't know how to speak English yet. And because of that, they went a whole year not being able to ask who died in their family. And so they were mourning all that time. Well, because my grandchildren are back here now, they didn't have to go through that. Because as soon as my son got out of that school, he came back here to his grandparents with his wife. And so we still have a little community back here. And we try to keep things alive. Try to teach them what the culture is, because if you forget your stories, you don't know who you are. I worry sometimes that might happen to this whole nation, that we would forget our stories and we wouldn't know who we are anymore. And then we'd start treating each other even meaner than we have before. And we'd make the same mistakes over and over again. So I'm coming back that I'm going to teach my children's children, and I hope their children's children, how to walk upon the earth in Babadasawa and Wachita, a proper balance.
Is that what you just said there? Say that again?
Babadasawa and Wachita. That is a proper balance, harmony, beauty. I want them to see what life is meant to be like. Now, we learned about that balance before we ever came here to Ohio. You see, we came from a place called Lake Chapala, down in Guadalajara, Mexico.
And is that right?
Yeah. Down there, we were part of what I've heard others call the Mayan people. That's not what we called them, but neither here nor there what we called them. We worked for them. They were great scientists, mathematicians, astronomers, awful bloody, but still, they were a great people. And we built what they thought of. And we grew the corn, the beans, and the squash. And those three things, they teach us how to live in balance. Because corn is strong and it grows up toward the sun. But beans, they have a weak back. And they have to climb the corn to reach the sun. Corn needs to have something that only the beans can make. I asked one of these new agricultural fellows what it was. He called it nitrogen. And they make that in their roots, their nodules, and then they give it to the corn. And so they take care of the corn as the corn takes care of them. And then the squash, it spreads out over the whole little hill where they're planted together, and it smothers all the weeds, and it holds all the rainwater for them. But squash, it needs shade, and the corn and the beans give it the shade that it needs. That is balance. That is harmony.
I've heard somebody tell me that story. I've heard somebody tell me the three, what do they call that?
The three sisters.
The three sisters. I've heard that story. That's a good one.
Yeah. And so down there we learned about that. But in working for the Mayan, we had a little problem in that they had another enemy that came in. Now again, we had a different name for them, but everybody called them Aztec later. And they thought the best way to take care of their God was to take our children, put them on the stone altars, and cut out their hearts.
Really?
We disagreed. And so one day, the men told the women, you take the children and you hide. We will go speak to these people. And at the end of that day of speaking, the Aztec said to our men, do you love this place? And our men said, no. We love our families. Then pass through. We don't want to fight you again. And we began a 300-year journey and finally came to the valley of the Spele-Withipi, the Ohio.
The valley of the what?
Spele-Withipi, gathering place of Eagles River.
Wow, okay.
And that is what the Iroquois people, the Haudenosaunee, they call Ohio. Beautiful place. Beautiful river. We have to agree with that. What they were doing in Ohio, we don't know. But because we came first.
It is a pretty river.
It is beautiful. Although you can't really do much in the way of any kind of boats on it. It's not very deep sometimes. You can walk across on the rocks at places. Perhaps someday they'll find a way to make the waters flow better. But when we came here and we found these people living out of balance and they were worshiping death instead of life, then we began to teach them life. And they prospered with us. And we've continued to live here right on up until that 1830 law that said we had to leave. And then we went to Kansas. And soon we'll be in Oklahoma. And it's because we have good farms now, good ranches, and someone else wants them.
So in Kansas, you guys had it pretty well, and then that's not good.
We built back again.
Uh-huh.
But the Missouri bushwhackers came in and they burned out many of our farms because we did not have slaves. And so we began to have to fight all of the time with those bushwhackers. And soon we then became Unionists. And that is why I and my son then fought in that war.
Mm-hmm.
He said I was too old, but I could still ride a horse as long as they helped me get up. But during all that time, we tried to protect our land and our people. And we tried to be good people of the United States, not the divided ones. But such is life, huh?